Let's practice creating table views. We're first going to create a new project. So we're going to open up xCode. We can press create a new xCode project. And we're going to choose iOS application and single view application. Let's give it a name so we can call it out of this world. And I'm going to go ahead and give it the class prefix OW for out of this world. You can use a different class prefix, like your initials if you so choose. We can press next. I'm going to initialize this with a Git repository, and I'm going to press create. And I can go ahead and enlarge this xCode project. And on our first screen, we need a table view. So let's go ahead and go to our storyboard. So our first screen needs a table view on it. There are two ways of accomplishing this inside of our storyboard file. We can drag a UI table view object onto our view controller and then link up the connections like we've done with our other view objects. Or we can drag a table view controller object which includes a view controller and a table view and already has all of our connections set up. We're going to show you both in this application so that you have an appreciation of what's being done. But we're going to start simply with our UI table view controller with all of the connections set up. Now that we've briefly covered MVC, I want to explain exactly what this scene on our storyboard is here. So I can go ahead and enlarge this scene, and let's enlarge the view controller. If you click the document outline, which we just opened up, you can see that there's a view associated with our view controller. This scene is also really handy to confirm that we have the correct view object selected in our storyboard. For example, with the view selected, I could change the background color if I wished. In our case, we want to simply drag a table view controller into our project, which also includes a view controller and a view. But this view is actually a UI table view, so that's perfect for our needs. If we look in the object library, you can see the UI table view object. So let's scroll down until we find it. And there's my table view object. But if I scroll back up, we see a table view controller object instead. Let's go ahead and first delete our view controller, because we're not going to be using this view controller. And we can drag a table view controller in instead. Don't worry about the app delegate files for now, but we are going to be deleting the OW view controller files since we're no longer using this view controller. This controller is trying to manage a view that no longer exists. So we can hit the delete key. I can move to trash. Make sure you move to trash instead of just removing references, as otherwise the file will still be there and we want to completely remove this file. We need a file to communicate with our new table view controller. Let's create a new file. So we can go to File, New File, and let's create an iOS Cocoa Touch Objective-C class. We can press Next. And let's make this a subclass of UI table view controller because we dragged a table view controller, not a view controller in. So this way our table view controller class can manage the table view controller on our scene here. And let's change the name to OW outer space table view controller. And we can press next. And we're going to make sure we have targets selected here and we can press create. And if for some reason your file wound up here in the application, you can drag this down so it looks nice and it's right below the storyboard. But it won't change our application at all since our file structure is flat. Now let's turn to our storyboard and make sure that our scene here is managed by our table view controller class that we just created. This way the view can be managed by the proper controller. So let's go ahead and select our view controller or our table view controller, and let's go to our identity inspector. Now we saw the attributes inspector earlier. We've also seen the connections inspector if you watched the week 1 discussion video, but in the identity inspector we can change the class here, and this is the view controller that will manage, or the controller that will manage this view. So we're going to change this to OW outer space view controller, table view controller. Now, sometimes it doesn't automatically autofill. I'm sure you expected it to. So you're going to want to be very careful in the spelling here. The problem is our xCode project has not pre-compiled yet. So if we go ahead and we can open it up here, If you want to confirm that this worked, you can select something else and then select your view controller again, or your table view controller, and then you'll be able to confirm that your class is updated properly inside of your identity inspector. Now let's take a look at the implementation file for our OW outer space table view controller file. So if we scroll down, we see that we get our normal methods like viewDidLoad and didReceive memory warning. We get a bunch of additional methods like number of sections in table, number of rows in section, as well as self-row at index path. These are really useful because it just creates some boilerplate code to get us up and running and to make our table view work. For now, let's ignore the comments, and we can take a look at the table view data source section. So we notice that there's a pragma mark here, and pragma marks work like comments, but they help us organize our code. So we generally group methods or similar methods together using a pragma mark. We can take a look at both of the methods inside of the table view data source section, which we see as number of rows or number of sections in table view and number of rows in section. So what do these mean? Well, remember that we talked about our view communicating with our controller through target action and delegation. This is an example of delegation, known as data source communication. Our table view is assigning our view controller, or our table view controller, as our data source. In other words, our view controller will be acting on behalf of our table view. The data source, which is our view controller, is responsible for telling our table view how many cells to display and what those cells should look like. The UI table view data source class then takes this information and prepares our table view to be displayed properly. Again, a delegate is saving us a lot of time and effort for how to display our UI table view's information. The first method, number of sections in table view, returns an integer value which tells the table view how many sections our table view should have. The second section, number of rows in section, tells us that for each section how many rows should be in that section. So again, we return an integer value. And for our third method, self-row at index path, we actually have to tell the table view what cell objects, or UI table view cell objects, to put in the rows. Using this functionality, the UI table view data source class can populate specific cells in our rows, and we'll later be able to create different cells in each row.